Today, most people in the United States are celebrating Thanksgiving Day. Their hypocrisy abounds on this day each year. Originally, the day was set aside in 1789 to be a day of thanksgiving and prayer to our Creator for blessing the United States. In George Washington's proclamation for this day, his opening statement was, "Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and to humbly to implore His protection and favor." I will speak in a moment where Yeshua says that only those who do His Father's will or His desire will be in His kingdom. And he says what His will is. He tells us. Those in the United States and the other scattered nations of Israel certainly are not doing His will. And they were not doing His will back then when George wrote this either. He goes on to add that one of the most important things that he was telling the people to be grateful for was the government. His exact words were, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. What hypocrisy. Many of you believe that the United States was established on our Creator's principles because they posted His 10 Commandments on their buildings and they talked about Him as their sovereign deity. Even this is hypocrisy. If you post His commandments on your building, this means that you are agreeing to represent them. Otherwise, doing so is just hypocrisy. Granted, the United States did result from our Creator's favor, but it was not because their founders were righteous men before His eyes. It was because of His promises that were passed down through the birthright promises that were handed down through Abraham, Isaac, and Israel and their descendants. The men that founded the United States back then were certainly not as far removed from any form of righteousness like the people who are in their government today, but neither were they a people who were obeying their Creator and seeking His favor in truth. They were seeking freedom and seeking religious freedom, but they were not seeking truth. Just look at the hypocrisy of posting the 10 Commandments in their buildings. They were not even obeying the Sabbath on its correct appointed time, and the Sabbath is one of the 10 that are on those tablets. Nor are most who live in this nation today obeying even the simplest of His commandments like His Sabbath. This day of giving thanks to Him is nothing more than a hypocritical representation of man's attempt to look righteous before their Maker on their own terms. Most of you full well reject His appointed times, yet you set apart days like this in vain hypocrisy. You set apart days like the abomination of the Mass of Christ that you call Christmas and the abomination of Easter, yet you will not hearken to His word. These false worship days are an abomination to our Creator, and they came from demonic origins anyway. George continued in his proclamation for this day to offer up praise for the government that he said was a blessing from the Almighty. He said, "For the peaceable and rational manner in which we have been enabled to establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness." Maybe I missed something in the scriptures. I thought our safety is to come from our Creator when we obey Him and walk in His statutes and in His judgments. I thought His word says that our delight and our happiness was to be in walking with Him. I don't remember it being a government of men that were to provide these things. Our Creator appointed leaders to govern Israel, and He told these leaders what to say and do. And if they needed to call a people to make war, they did, and people stepped forward. I do not see a political system in the scriptures. I do not see a government led by men. I see the people of Elohim being led by Elohim through His servants. I see rebellious people like Korah and the other self-righteous men who rose up with him being consumed by our Creator when they rose up against the ones whom He had chosen. I see His anointed choosing kings, and I see Him rising up judges. No, our Elohim is far from being pleased with the United States. He has protected them, though, through time, along with the other scattered nations of Israel, because He was calling His first fruits out of them as He built His family. In his proclamation, George speaks of executing and obeying the Constitution and the laws of men. What he does not speak about is obeying Yahweh Elohim's laws and statutes. In his opening statement, he talked about obeying his will, but nowhere is there any evidence that George knew that obeying his will meant walking in his Torah with his statutes and judgments like the scriptures teach us his will is. As far as living his truth to be a witness to the other nations and taking it to them like we were commanded to, he touched on this in hypocrisy when he said to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue and the increase of science among them, referring to other nations and us. What is this true religion that he was referring to, and where did it come from? It was the abominations of the scattered nations of Israel that they were sent into captivity to. And it came out of the mother whore of Babylon and the abomination of desolation. And what virtue does he speak of here? Is it our Creator's righteousness? Or is it the self-righteousness of these men who wanted religious freedom and freedom from oppression? We'll say one thing, though, at least back then, most people considered obvious abominations like homosexuality and adultery as evil, and at least there was a form of modesty still practiced. But they were not seeking after our Creator's righteousness. Today, even a watered-down form of righteousness like what they had back then is missing from the world, especially the United States. It is a cesspool of filth. Just look at how people dress alone. What will those in the United States be doing today on this special day of Thanksgiving to our Creator anyway? Maybe saying a prayer over a turkey and then watch some football or a parade or something like this? You are full of hypocrisy celebrating the traditions of men while full well rejecting our Creator's instruction that He gave us to mold us in His image with. The title of today's video is Ravening Wolves and Thanksgiving. The subject of ravening wolves fits into what I am speaking about in regards to the hypocrisy of the United States claiming a day of Thanksgiving to our Creator while rejecting Him altogether. The result of rejecting Him comes from being children of Satan. Yeshua spoke this plainly when He explained who the tares are and why they are tares and why they'll be burnt up. I'll get to this in a minute. I have spoken in other videos how Isaac's son Israel prophesied to his sons what would befall them in the last days. Of Benjamin, he said in Genesis 49:27, Benjamin will raven as a wolf. In the morning he will devour the prey, and at night he will divide the spoil. This is a prophecy that speaks of what would come out of Benjamin in the last days. Saul of Tarsus spoke that he was of the tribe of Benjamin, and his teachings have continued to devour our Creator's truth to this day. They have systematically dismantled our Creator's perfect instructions that He gave us to perfect us. They created a condition over time where the Torah that our Creator gave us to live by was completely desolated in the scattered nations of Israel. And now the scattered nations of Israel are like ravening wolves propped up on the lies that came out of Benjamin. It is easy to prove from the scriptures that Saul and his writings are the abomination of desolation. He was not the originator of the sour grapes that produced the poisonous wine of fornication, but he was one of his father the devil's primary soldiers. Most of Israel had already departed from the Torah before Saul came along, but they did not have writings that were merged with our Creator's instructions like Saul's and his followers did. Saul was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and his ravening teachings have devoured indeed. The problem with wolves is they have babies, they have puppies. Wolves teach their ravening ways to their offspring, and the pack grows. This is what has happened, and the lies have flourished, and they have devoured the truth. How do you identify wolves? After all, Yeshua said that they are cloaked. He said in Matthew 7:15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. In the next verse, he tells us how to identify them. You can know them, or you can recognize them by their fruits. This is really simple if you will simply believe our Elohim and His Son. His word testifies to their fruit. Yeshua goes on in the following verses to give a very straightforward explanation of what the wolf's fruit is. He explains what the good fruit is and what the evil fruit is with one word. He says that a good tree brings forth good fruit, and a corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit, and tells us that the evil fruit will be cast into the fire. And then he goes on to explain, in verse 21, not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, except he that does the will or does the desire of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied or preached in your name, and cast out devils in your name, and done many wonderful works in your name? And then I will confess to them, depart from me, I never knew you, because your works were lawlessness. He's in there saying they violated the Torah. The Torah had no place in them. He makes it clear what the good fruit is and what the bad fruit is with this one word, lawlessness. The good fruit is not just calling him Lord or Master. It is not just doing good things in his name. It is obeying his Father. The good works are a byproduct of obeying him anyway, but they are not what makes the fruit good by itself. Is this the will that George was talking about doing in his Thanksgiving proclamation? I can guarantee you that it's our Creator's will that we obey him, especially considering the mark of the beast that he has given is disobedience. And Yeshua was pretty straightforward when he said that if you are not doing his will, you will not be in his kingdom. You might say, my Bible doesn't say lawlessness. The King James says iniquity, or the NIV says evildoers. Or maybe you have some other translation. At least the New King James got it right. Anyway, look the word up. It is the Greek word anomia, which means violation of the law, lawlessness. And he was not talking about the Constitution of the United States, nor the laws of men. He was talking about the same law that he said that he did not come to get rid of one punctuation mark from it until heaven and earth pass away, until it accomplishes his purposes and builds his Father's family like it was sent to do. The good fruit is those who obey his Father, and I certainly do not see this being the will that the founders of America set out to accomplish. Nor is it the will of those celebrating this tradition of men today, if they are in the blasphemous religion called Christianity. He goes on to prove this even more in the following verses. Verse 24, therefore, whoever hears my word, or hears my logos, and does it, I will liken him to a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. Again, what word is he talking about? He is talking about the same word that he told us that we needed to live by every word of, his Father's word. And the same word that he became and represented and told us to follow. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it did not fall, because it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that hears my word and does not do it, I will liken him to a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. The entire word of Elohim supports this once you take out that which is not his word from what you call your Bible. His word proves that the writings of Saul of Tarsus and his followers are false, because their writings lead people away from his path. His word tells us that anyone who seeks to lead you to a different path is false, and to stone them, to purge them out. Some have written and told me, yeah, but Saul also said that he kept the law, and he told us that we ought to keep it. Well, wolves are very clever. This is why Yeshua said that they are cloaked in sheep's clothing. Saul spoke with a forked tongue like his father the serpent. Just look at his fruit. His fruit is his offspring. A third of the world does not obey their Creator's Torah today because of his writings. Case closed. The United States was not founded on the truth, nor are they walking in the truth today. If it had been founded on the truth, their Constitution would have been their Creator's Torah, and evil would have been purged out. And the real truth would have been lived as an example to the world, and it would be quite the place to live in by now. But instead, Israel did not embrace the truth that was delivered to them, and they lived lies as an example to the world. And look at the world today. It is a cesspool of diverse colors, and it is coming unglued as I speak. Yeshua warned us of the ravening wolves again in Matthew 24, And many false prophets will arise and will deceive many, as we referred to the wolves before as false prophets, because lawlessness or violation of the Torah will abound, and the love of many will wax cold. He's actually saying there, he said, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will wax cold. I read that there without the correct punctuation, but he is saying that not only would the love for one another wax cold, because lawlessness abound, but also that the love for him and his Father would wax cold as well. And this is what has happened. Christianity is in love with a make-believe Messiah and a make-believe version of his Father. Scriptures prove this. This is why he kept repeating to his disciples the night before he was killed, that if you love me, you will keep the commandments. And this is why he said that if you do not keep them, he will have to tell you to depart from him, because he never knew you. He and his Father take up their abode in us and with us if we walk with them on his narrow path. This is how we know them and they know us. Otherwise, Elohim said plainly that he gives us over to worship other Elohims that are not him, and we are sent into captivity to them. Christianity is in this captivity. His word proves this. In the next verse, Yeshua said, but he that will endure to the end, the same will be saved. Endure in what? What was he talking about in the verse before this? He is saying those who endure in obedience to his Father will be saved. He gave us the description of who his Father's saints are in the book of Revelation, and the rest of his word backs this up. In Revelation 14:12, he said that they are those who continue in the commandments and have the same belief that he had and still has today. He believes his Father's word, and he became it and told us to follow him, told us to become it. The United States and her allies have thumbed their nose at their Creator's blessings by not obeying him. They have not loved him. They have not shown them their love. They can set aside a special day of thanks if they want. It means nothing to him. It's just an hypocrisy. If they had loved him and his Son, they would have obeyed them. So spare me your Thanksgiving rhetoric. The only reason why you have prevailed in his blessings until now is because he was calling out those who would become his from your midst. And now he is holding back your destruction until the last possible moment for the sake of those who will turn to him in the coming days. You are a den of ravening wolves that are dressed up in sheep's clothing, just like your father the snake and his other pups like Saul of Tarsus. You have heralded your righteousness to the world and puffed yourselves up like you are something special, but you have divided the spoil. The truth is, you could have been something special, but you rejected the truth that would have made you special in our Creator's eyes. And now you will be recompensed. He has held back his wrath until now while he built his family, but soon it will be loosed. Yeshua said in Matthew 23, verse 28, and in this manner, speaking of looking good on the outside but harboring all sorts of uncleanness inside, he says, but in this manner you outwardly appear righteous to men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Same word. He was speaking this back then to the scribes and the Pharisees, but this is also a parable for you today. At least they kept the law on a physical plane somewhat, even though inside they were full of hypocrisy because their hearts were uncircumcised. This is why Yeshua said that unless our righteousness exceeds theirs, we would not be in his Father's kingdom. They practiced his commandments on a physical plane in order to be seen as righteous of others, but they did not live them to have their hearts circumcised by them. How much worse are the scattered nations of Israel today? You in Christianity reject his commandments altogether, yet you still prop yourselves up in your self-righteousness. You trample underfoot his shed blood while wallowing in your rebellion, claiming that you serve him and his Father. You go so far as to set aside what you call a special day like this to show your appreciation to him, yet you reject the days that he tells you to set aside. Can you not see your hypocrisy? Why not show him and his Son your appreciation every day by loving them and yielding to why he created you? He created us to mold and fashion us in his image, and he sent his word to accomplish this in us. He is sending this warning to you as a cry for you to come out of the whoredom. He says, come out of her, my people. Return to him, and he will deliver you into a new era of time when his way will be a way of life. He is going to continue to build his family, but first he is going to purge out all who will not choose to come to his call. In a parable in Matthew 13, Yeshua speaks that the good seed are the children of his Father's kingdom, and that he has sown. And he was his Father's word personified in the flesh, and he has since been given the name, the word of Elohim, according to the book of Revelation. The children of the kingdom are sown by his Father's word. And the tares that he spoke of were sown by Satan, and they are the wicked or the evil children. They are the wolf's pups. What does he say? What does he say makes children the children of Satan? Therefore, wicked children, and what's going to happen to them? He tells us. Matthew 13:41. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all that have stumbled and worked lawlessness, or did lawlessness. He is saying that his Father's Torah had no place in them. And they will cast them into the fiery furnace, and there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Spoke about that yesterday, the children's teeth set on edge. Let's approach it with the parable of the sour grape. Verse 43, then the righteous will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He has ears, let him hear. He goes on to give some pretty good advice. He goes on to give the parable of the hidden treasure in the field and the parable of the pearl of great value. These parables say to seek his Father's kingdom like seeking a treasure, and then once you have found it, lay siege to it with everything that you have. Sell out and lose your life for his kingdom's sake. In order to do this, you will first have to leave the hypocrisy and stop serving the make-believe image of him and his son. You're going to have to leave the wolf pack. You're going to have to stop drinking the wine of fornication that comes from the sour grapes. The truth that will set you free truly is something to be thankful for and to rejoice over. Not just on some day in November, but with every breath for eternity.